Hello, hello. Welcome to the Worthy Writers Podcast. I'm your host, Kirsten McNeil, a Canadian self-published author and full-service editor for fellow writers. On this podcast, you'll get a look into my personal writing journey and find encouragement to enjoy your own. If you had a good time with me, I would appreciate if you could like, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. All right, worthy writers, let's jump in. Episode number 1, my favorite childhood books. Today, I will discuss how my favorite books as a kid inspired me, more about my love for books, and how important reading is. You may or may not find some random facts as well that give you a better glimpse into who I am. One of the most common questions writers may get asked is, which books or authors impacted you the most? I've always been an avid reader. My mom always encouraged us to read, and we had tons of books available to us at home or when we took regular trips to the library. To quote the great Arthur Reed and his friends, having fun isn't hard when you've got a library card. For those of you who don't know, Arthur was a cartoon on PBS, which started in the 90s, whose characters are all animals. And when I searched it, there's apparently still new episodes airing with 24 seasons to date. How crazy is that? Am I the only one that still considers the 90s as like 10 years ago? Let's keep it that way. My point is, reading and entertainment from my childhood was very influential in forming what inspired me to be who I am today. My absolute ultimate favorite book series as a kid was The Magic Tree House by Mary Pope Osborne. If anyone knows if the series is still going and how many books there are to date, please let me know. I collected over 100 in the series, and I feel like when I stopped buying them, there were still so many I didn't have. The first book in the series of chapter books is called Dinosaurs Before Dark. I'm 100% sure this series is where my love for alliteration came from. When I try to come up with names of shops and restaurants in the books I write, I find that I'm choosing alliteration names. This book is about Jack and Annie, brother and sister. Annie is a little more adventurous, while her older brother is more cautious. When they find this treehouse in the woods by their house, of course Annie wants to go investigate. After they climb the ladder, they see this treehouse is stacked full of books. Anything you can think of. History, medieval times, animals, different countries, you name it. One of the kids picks up this book about dinosaurs, hence the title. Side note, me and my siblings had these plastic dinosaur toys when we were kids. I think my favorite to play with was the Brontosaurus, you know, that long-necked one. So one of them is reading this dinosaur book. And if I remember correctly, the trick is to point to a page and say you wish you could go there. Then they're literally transported back in time to the dinosaur age in the book he was reading. Obviously, they're so confused. They're face to face with these dinosaurs. Annie, I think, makes friends with a Stegosaurus. Jack rides on a pterodactyl. Does anyone else notice that Jack is such a common name in fiction? Like, there's always a character named Jack. Annie and Jack are trying to survive in this dinosaur age. Eventually, they get back to the treehouse, and there's a book about their hometown, Frog Creek, Pennsylvania. So they make it home safely. It wouldn't be much of a kid's book if one of them got eaten. This is not Jurassic Park. Side note, we used to play that movie's theme song in high school band. I played the clarinet. Don't ask me what the notes were, I haven't played in years. The clarinet is like a super sophisticated recorder. The sound is lower, smoother, not that high-pitched squeal we were forced to endure in 4th and 5th grade from recorders. In 6th grade, we got to play ukuleles. I still remember my music teacher singing "He's Got the Whole World in His Hand," and we had to listen to every single person play it correctly. In grade 7, we got to choose between continuing with ukulele or being in the concert band. I chose clarinet, like my sister and mother before me. Returning to the topic at hand, in every book after that dinosaur adventure, Jack and Annie go on so many adventures, meeting inventors, playwrights, and learning so much about the world. This is the perfect analogy of what reading a book is like. You are literally transported to a new world. how cool would it be to have a treehouse stacked with books that takes you anywhere in time and space? Jack and Annie make friends, completing quests for Merlin and Morgan Le Fay. Every book was a wild adventure, which also teaches you a lot of stuff. God knows if I could remember what I learned back then, but I had fun. One of the books I remember distinctly was called Pirates Past Noon. I remember trying to write a pirate story in 2nd grade inspired by that book. 7 years old, writing a pirate story. It never became anything, but maybe I should try again one day. Also, I just remembered about this book I read in the same grade called Bunnicula. It was a vampire bunny who sucked all the juices out of vegetables. The cat in the family didn't trust it, and the dog was just along for the ride. This inspired a couple characters I wrote, but I'm going to talk about that more in a later podcast. I just had to mention it because that book is a hidden gem of the world. Back to Mary Pope Osborne. She was my favorite author and inspired me to write, learn, be creative, and to never forget to be yourself and keep growing as a person. Other chapter books I loved as a kid were Junie B. Jones by Barbara Park and Amazing Days of Abby Hayes by Anne Mazer. Looking back on it now, I think Junie B. Jones was about a really snotty kindergartner or first grader who just wants to make trouble and be noticed. I'm sure when I read these books, I was like, oh my god, yes, I so relate to this girl. It's so hard to be a kid. All jokes aside, it is hard to be a kid. When you're an adult, you can forget what it's like to live free of judgment and bask in your imagination. Junie taught me how to be brave and think outside the box. What might be perceived by adults as this bratty, misbehaved child could be construed by a kid as exploration, curiosity, and learning to be a leader. Then there was Abby Hayes. This character is a writer who has this Ask Abby column in the school paper at some point, if I remember correctly. She writes in a journal, wants to go to writing camp, and has a cat named T-Jeff. I don't remember why that was the name, which she tries to hide from her family at first. I remember really enjoying this book, especially for the parts where she writes in her journal. It was presented in a different font and colorful as opposed to the regular text of the main story. I would also flip forward in the book to see when the journal parts would come. It was just so fun to read and get into her mind a little better. I think this is why I love writing in first person a lot. I love focusing in on one character and exploring all their thoughts and feelings. It was fun to connect with Abby, seeing as she was a writer too. I thought it'd be cool to have an Ask Kirsten column in a paper to help others. I guess through my Instagram lives, the Worthy Writers community, and this podcast, I've finally got my wish to share positivity and empowerment with others. Another theme I've noticed in these books that I've loved reading is that they all have a strong female character, which is so important to have in fiction. Annie is adventurous and loving. Junie is strong and opinionated. Abby is driven and creative. All things I wish to be. All things that are admirable qualities and extremely common qualities in women. Aside from chapter books, two authors I have to mention are Dr. Seuss and Robert Munsch. How can you not mention Dr. Seuss, right? We had so many of those books. Cat in the Hat, Fox in Socks, Green Eggs and Ham, One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish. So many others that were so silly, so ridiculous, but when you really stop to think about them, they share a message of love, education, caring for the planet, taking care of each other, exploring the world from a different perspective. Who wouldn't want their child to learn those values? Aside from a few that they've taken off the market, but I won't get into that. I even bought some of these books for my friend who has kids. I want to be the Auntie Kirsten who buys them all the books they could ever need, helping to encourage them in their learning and growing. Reading with your family is such an important experience, and if I didn't have access to many books, who knows if I would have been as impacted to be a writer. Then we have Robert Munsch, who wrote several picture books. Paper Bag Princess, Thomas's Snowsuit, Love You Forever, I Have to Go, Alligator Baby, Stephanie's Ponytail. Fun fact about Stephanie's Ponytail. When I was in 3rd grade, our class was learning all about Robert Munsch, and we split into groups to act out the books for our parents. I was the narrator, and I took my job very seriously. I got to stand at the podium and read with my strong voice. I remember at one point, one of the people in my group forgot to say their line, and I tried to whisper, "Say your line, say your line." My teacher was just like, "Keep it moving." I'm a little sad that's all I remember about the experience, but I'm pretty sure it was a good time. I'm not sure if I would say Robert Munsch inspired me to write, but he definitely made it fun to read with his funny storylines and characters you could connect with. I think that's the most important thing when a child is influenced by their surroundings. Connection, positive impacts and experiences, encouragement to explore your passions. Through elementary school, my favorite time was when we got to read silently for 15 minutes. That was never enough time. I could only read a few pages, and there was always that annoying kid who kept whispering the whole time, making me struggle to focus. But I loved it regardless. A few teachers even asked us to keep track of the books we read and how many pages. I loved it. One of my friends even told me about a hack to increase your page count. I think we did it to impress the teacher. There could have been a prize involved, but I don't remember. The number of pages isn't just in the story itself, but the pages before and after. The author notes, the sneak peeks of future books, all the epilogues and whatnot. This could be why I enjoy reading a book literally from front to back. This instilled urge to think that a book isn't complete until you flip through every single page. Authors put a lot of effort into creating their books. Every page is special to them, so why not read it? I just want to mention that reading books and buying books are 2 different hobbies. I remember checking out stacks of books from the library, but sometimes I never even read them all before we had to take them back. Just having those books in my room made me feel happy, and that translated into buying every book I thought looked pretty when I was older. Isn't it great having a fresh book on the shelf that you know you won't read for the next few years? Right now, the books in my bookshelf are stacked and shoved in there to maximize the amount of space I have. One of these days, I hope to have one of those big, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves where I can display every book and their beautiful spines perfectly. I know I've veered away from talking about the books of my childhood, but the takeaway here is that books and writing are my life. I'm sure there's so much I've forgotten and little memories I could share with you, but today's podcast is coming to an end. What do I want you to remember after listening? Reading is so important. All you need to have fun is a library card, or in today's age, access to millions of books on your tablet. I have been inspired by so many books, authors, and experiences with my family to become a writer. It's who I am. It's in my blood. Pro tip, anything can be a bookmark if it's flat enough. Read as much as you can. Find the lessons and the joy. Listen to LeVar Burton, actor and children's literacy advocate of Reading Rainbow, when he says, "I think reading is part of the birthright of the human being." When this podcast is done and you're sitting there reminiscing about your childhood favorites, I challenge you to start reading. Pull your car over because it's dangerous to read and drive. Clock out of work early. Shut yourself in your room and start reading. Just kidding. Please don't do any of that if it keeps you from your daily responsibilities. But in all seriousness, try to read something today. A sentence, paragraph, chapter, doesn't matter. Reading is reading. Then after that, let me know what you thought of this podcast, or what some of your favorite books are. Reach me on Instagram, email, or join the discussion on Buy Me a Coffee. Worthy Writers Club subscribers on there have access to exclusive discussions, behind-the-scenes content, and fun graphics. If you're not part of that, there is still a discussion topic and graphic available to you every week. I love connecting with others to chat about all things reading and writing. It encourages me to keep doing what I'm doing and helps me feel like I'm reaching people, not just talking into outer space. But if I do make contact with aliens, I'll let you know. On next week's episode, I'm switching things up by sharing my views on a common writing myth. Writing is a solitary activity. Then the following week, I'll return to talking about my writing journey with stories I wrote as a kid. Thank you for listening. Happy writing, worthy writers. Thank you for listening to the Worthy Writers podcast. Did you enjoy this episode? Share your love and support by checking out my Buy Me a Coffee profile for bonus content and to help me continue building my creative empire. If you'd like other ways to connect, follow me on Instagram, join my Facebook group, or explore my website to learn more about me, be part of my community, or suggest topics for future episodes. All links are in the show notes. I can't wait to connect with you. My final words before you go, never forget that you are worthy.